Hello and welcome to another amazing part of What If Garp Changed the Future? Professional Ranter wrote this amazing story. Please support them. Don't forget to like, sub, and leave a comment. Now let's dive in. Kong and Akainu, and then a head broke through the clouds and let out a thunderous roar. It was the size of a giant's, teeth jagged, spikes for hair. It breathed out a cloud of frost and from it came a storm of ice birds. They let out screeches and attacked the two marines. Akainu lifted his magma arm and fired at them, but his projectiles froze the moment they separate from his body. The birds clawed at him, turning his magma to ice as tough as stone. They created 4 long gashes across his face, 2 on the left side going from his chin upwards stopping just before his nose and 2 on the right over his eye, almost clawing it out. The giant stood on its feet. It was incredibly skinny, janky, built like a corpse. Part of its chest resembled a ribcage and just above that, within it, was Kazan. The giant slashed its clawed fingers the ground, forcing Kong and Akainu to dodge to opposite sides. But then a bear made of ice rushed out from one of the slices in the ground at Kong with a roar. It stood on its hind legs and clawed at him, biting rapidly as Kong had to retreat. From the opposite slice a pack of ice wolves ran out and surrounded Akainu. They were growling, hackles raised. Every single part of them acted like a regular beast, but they were made of ice. From the left middle slice, a tiger jumped out and joined the bear in going after Kong, and from the right middle slice slithered out a massive snake and it bit at Akainu. Akainu dodged back, it too cold for him to use his magma effectively. What the hell is this? The giant let out another roar and giant ice eagle raced out from the cloud of frost its roar created. Kazan. Alvia looked at the massive giant from the deck, eyes wide. She had to refocus herself and fight the marines trying to board the ship. Kong looked at where Kazan was in the giant. It's incomplete. He's too vulnerable, he's never attempted anything like this before. He dodged to the side and slammed his staff into the ice bear, but it didn't shatter like he had expected. Instead, the bear let out a whine and backed away, growling, but how is he creating these ice beasts? Most likely he doesn't possess the ice fruit like we thought we knew, and given what I can tell what he knew. But that puts us on a somewhat even playing field because he can't control what he makes. But he can control the giant's movements, but its lack of defense and his inexperience with it puts him at extreme risk. Kazan directed the ice giant and punched rapidly at Kong. "I'll kill you!" He yelled out, creating a crater as his ice beasts fled out of the way of his destruction. Kong however jumped up and onto one of the incoming punches. They were wild, filled with grief and fear, irrational attacks that made it easy for Kong to dode. Jumping onto the arm he ran up it and hit the shoulder, shattering the ice and sending the arm flying back. Jumping up Kong decapitated the head then severed the other arm before slamming his staff into the chest and sending a wave of armament hockey through it, shooting Kazan out and leaving the chest and legs still standing. Kazan hit the ground with a thud and struggled to get back up, his ice beasts hiding away in the forest. "Curious, but we have no time to figure out what devil fruit he actually has," Kong sighed. "A shame we don't have some regular fruit on hand so we could collect his devil fruit and give it to a more deserving marine." "Kizaru," he spoke into the den. "Transport Akainu to the command ship, he's taking over fighting the granting wish. Tsuru, fire on Bogart to keep him busy." Kizaru appeared and grabbed Akainu and then flew away as shots fired away. Kong looked at the struggling Kazan with a disappointed stare. "You had so much potential as a marine." He walked away and to the side until he stopped and leaned against a frozen tree. "Ships, fire on Kazan's location right in front of the ice giant's legs. Do not stop until I tell you to." The 3 ships positioned themselves and fired out their first salvo. "Kazan!" Alvia cried out. And then time froze. Death stood in front of Kong and let out a sigh. "Damn it. This isn't going to be good." She took a step and appeared in front of the pile of rubble Garp was buried under at Dressrosa's dock. She could see the shining sphere of the eternity of time held just before his death. "I hate this so much, but I can't ignore the laws of the dead like we did with Emu. And not with him." Reaching her hand out she touched the eternity and entered it. "Get up." She jumped at Garp's yell. He's still alive. He kept trying to pull at his fist hanging out from the rubble. But it was all a recreation, a simple part of his life that he could see before he died. He can get to Luffy, Ace, Sabo, Law, Reiju, Yanji, Niji, Ichiji, Cosette, Drake, Bonnie, everyone. He uselessly tried to dig at the rubble but his hands just passed through it. "Garp," Death called out but she was ignored. She looked on in sadness as Garp kept trying to make himself get back up. "Garp, that's enough." "Shut up." Garp yelled at her, finally looking at her. "I'm not done, I haven't finished my mission, I haven't protected Luffy's smile." We will figure out a way to finish it. Death spoke calmly, holding her hands up placatingly. But it can't be with you anymore. What? Just let me go back, let me at least kill Kong. Garp pleaded, eyes wide with desperation. Death shook her head. I can't do that. The last time I ignored the laws of the dead, it led to the creation of the world government and an imbalance in nature that took us centuries to fix. She held her hand out. We'll take you on in an advisory role. You'll still be working to protect his smile. Please accept your death and move on to the next part in your journey. She gave him a kind smile. It carried an apology with it even if she did not say it out loud. Garp looked back, the eternity shifting to the moment Dragon gave him Luffy to care for, the first time he ever saw his smile. But there's no guarantee, there's not enough time. At least let me save my crew, they can take over. Garp turned back to her, begging, desperate. I won't break the laws again, Garp. Death snapped before she smoothed her features and took a deep breath. Garp, you have to accept this, please. Garp looked at her outstretched hand, then back at baby Luffy. He gulped, tried to think of anything that would let him return, but he couldn't think of any. He lifted his hand, ready to accept Death's. Are you really going to accept this just like that? A voice asked, and suddenly the eternity shifted. They were in an arena built out of scrap, but the stadium was empty. This is the old arena in the Gray Line. Garp recognized one of the old places he once fought in, before it was burned down during one of the Gray Line's burnings. Looking behind him, he saw a tall woman with a blue mohawk, and an outfit put together from scraps. On her back hung a spear and an axe, and in her left hand she held a knife. In her other hand was a rifle, heavily modified. The Junker Queen? Death's eyes widened in surprise at the sight of the last Magnet fruit user. What are you doing here, Odessa Stone? How is she here? Odessa let out a laugh. You're just going to let this happen? What kind of fighter are you? The eternity shifted again to a battlefield, the Battle of Tempest Gorge. Garp said out of reflex. You died not in control of yourself. A large man scolded, armored and with a broken axe, and Nemia was hovering over his shoulder. How can you declare your death true when you did not decide when you fell? Godfrey? Death stepped back at the sight of one of the first emperors of the sea after the founding the world government. The eternity become a constant blur. You let yourself get manipulated, walked into the most obvious trap in the world. What were you thinking? A gray-haired woman yelled at him. You are a warrior who has fought in countless battles, yet you let yourself be killed by something so moronic? Ambessa? Death yelped at the sight of the matriarch of war. You died for revenge, not to protect those you love. Shameful. A man with a spiked gauntlet scolded him. At Habungumi, the savior, Death was speaking out of reflex. She knew the name for all the souls she had processed back into the cycle of reincarnation, and seeing those souls reappear was confusing, to say the least. A cloaked man with hair resembling flames appeared sitting. To allow yourself to be lost to your emotions, to lack discipline and control, to call yourself a master and teacher is nothing short of egotistical. He shook his head, disappointed. Kaijiro Rengoku. Death looked at the flame Hashira sadly, his death caused by one of her follies. More people came out and yelled at Garp, each of them Death recognized as warriors who put their mark on the world even if they were no longer remembered. You abandoned your crew. You let your rage kill you. You cared more about revenge than your grandson? They yelled at him. Death opened her mouth to yell at them. That's enough. A voice commanded and they fell silent. A blue-haired woman stepped through them, wearing armor with a sword in hand. Ares? Garp recognized her from her armor he had seen in pictures. Lily? Death asked softly. The sight of Nefertari D. Lily was the biggest surprise so far. What is going on? All of these people, are they Garp's past lives? Lily pointed at Garp, and a chain lashed out and bound itself around his wrists and neck, choking him. HB? A laugh echoed around them and the warriors disappeared and the eternity blurred to the point of blackness. Despite everything, even facing your wife's murderer, you hold back, Lily's voice scolded him. Death looked around rapidly. No, it can't be him. Not him, he's dead, he can't be here, no. You trust Persephone, yet she has not told you 3 critical truths. A pair of glowing purple eyes looked down upon him. A tentacled hand lashed out and gripped Garp by his face. The truth of the old timeline. Garp struggled against the chain as it bound his hands behind his back while wrenching free from the being's grip. The truth of the last time they traveled a wish into the past before you. Garp stepped back as a giant creature with a squid head came out of the shadows. Cthulhu. Death uttered his name in absolute fear. Cthulhu chuckled, and of course, the truth of the rise fruit. Death's eyes widened and Garp stopped his movements. He turned his head to look at Death out of the corner of his eye, but she wouldn't look at him. Oh, she really didn't give you any warning? Cthulhu tilted his head, leaning down to look Garp in the eyes. Shut up, Garp, please don't listen to him, Death begged. He only wishes to turn people mad. But the truth does that far better than lies. I learned that since we last saw each other. Cthulhu shrugged. He used his bigger right hand as a platform and lifted it under Garp's feet and stood up to his full height. The truth of the old timeline is that the world ended, Ragnarok came and killed everyone, he revealed. Garp's eyes widened, briefly turning back to look at Death, hoping she would say something to the contrary, but she looked away. The truth of their last champion of a wish is that it was Emu, who went on to create the world government and enslaved millions and killed trillions. What? Garp finally realized Death's early words. And the truth of the rise fruit is that it is what killed you. Garp was shaking. Is he telling the truth? Death flinched. It was a necessary thing to add to the fruit to keep the balance of death. The more the fruit is used, the person who uses it has their lifespan halved. Cthulhu chuckled. Why do you think your attack upon the factory was so easy? Most of the guards and the warden there had used the fruit at least once each, some near or at more than 10. You used the fruit twice, but at your age you might not have much time left, and clearly you did not. Garp sharply turned to look at Death. You couldn't give me a warning? He yelled at her. I could have used what time I had left to prepare my crew. You still would have resurrected Queen Odoheim and Fisher Tiger? Cthulhu asked, surprised. Of course I would have. But you couldn't warn me of the consequences? Garp jumped from Cthulhu's hand to the ground below. You want me to complete this mission, yet one of your own creations you could not warn me of? Well, of course, while music is the primary creator of devil fruits, those like the rise fruit are of Death's creations, Cthulhu pointed out. Stop talking. Death yelled at Cthulhu. Look, Garp, I'm sorry, but there were no loopholes that would allow me to warn you. But music could have, they have a few useful loopholes, Cthulhu mocked. A loud crack drew Death's attention. Looking, she saw a crack in the eternity. How? More cracks appeared as Cthulhu began to laugh madly. Is it a rejection of his death that breaks your eternity? No, not quite. Perhaps a rejection of you as his reaper? Cthulhu mockingly messed with the tentacles around his mouth like they were a beard. No, that doesn't work. Then it must be a rejection of death itself. But that wouldn't work because in the past there have been souls you have collected that rejected death itself. More and more cracks appeared, until everywhere you could look there were multiple cracks in the eternity. It is a rejection, simply you. Not as death or his reaper, but you. He rejects you for everything. He rejects death herself, not death itself. He rejects everything you have done to him by hiding the truth. Cthulhu dissolved into a laughter that shook the eternity. He rejects you. And then it shattered, his laugh echoing behind, leaving Garp still chained up in death, time still frozen. Impossible, Death uttered. Garp, listen, I need to take you to the afterlife. Your soul shouldn't be dash. Garp suddenly kicked her in the stomach and sent her flying back. Garp was panting, his rage already beginning to overtake him. You? Garp's eyes were manic for a moment. And you were just about to let your rage control you again? Luffy's wish jumped up and hand-chopped the top of Garp's head. Death blinked for a moment. Where did you come from? What are you doing here? Luffy's wish, however, ignored her. You gotta learn how to control it. You neglected the training that Hallow gave you for it, and because of that you died. As well as because of the rise fruit, Luffy's wish pushed Garp down to his knees. Seems you need another lesson. Luffy's wish held out their hand and the black book they had given to Garp flew into the air. It rapidly flipped through the pages, showing the objectives and the drawings of the moments. Garp created a massive change to the timeline, but then it began to glow. They had stopped upon a completely blank set of pages, and then they began to unfold. Untold, the pages were 10 times bigger. Odama! Garp jerked at hearing Luffy scream. The pages creating a moving drawing. Luffy and his crew are in a field, and across from them is Kong, holding a little girl by her neck. What? Death didn't remember seeing this when Luffy's wish showed them the old timeline. Big brother. Luffy, Odama choked out. Brother? Garp's eyes widened at the words. Another sworn sibling, Kong grumbled. What does this put the number of siblings? Kong squeezed and snapped Odama's neck. That you've gotten killed at? Luffy's pained scream echoed as the drawings erased. Akainu assigned Kong to capture Luffy, and after weeks of attempts this is where he succeeded. Luffy's wish whispered into Garp's ear, killing your granddaughter. Ink began to color the pages again, and this time it was Kong talking with Akainu. They don't know he had lovers. It's better to not let them know he has no purity and could potentially have children. Do what you have to ensure they can't use that to halt his execution, Kong told Akainu. It was his idea? Garp asked, voice cracking. Only to do something. It was Sakazuki's choice to have Luffy raped. Luffy's wish gripped Garp's head and had him look upon the book. Stop this. Death ran at them, but Luffy's wish held up a hand and a shockwave sent her flying back. The drawings erased but then shifted to Luffy in a cell, right after the executions of all his friends, family and lovers, but just before those prisoners used Luffy. Luffy was looking at the ground, eyes hollow, but then the door opened and Hancock was thrown in, landing on the ground with a yelp. Hancock? Hancock looked up and she forced a smile on her face. Luffy, my love. Garp struggled against the wish's grip, knowing what was coming. She's pregnant, twins it seems, Kong revealed as he walked into the cell. He had a sword hanging from his hip. Apparently, for the first time in her people's history, she was going to give birth to 2 boys. What were the names you were going to give them again? Luffy looked at Hancock and Garp could see the love in his eyes despite the drawing. It doesn't matter. Suddenly Kong stabbed the sword through Hancock's stomach, blood spattering onto Luffy's face. Kong then wrenched it out and slit Hancock's throat. Luffy crawled forward and curled around Hancock, trying to hold her as she bled out, crying his eyes out. Kong laid the final blow that took Luffy's smile. And you are going to let him live? Luffy's wish mockingly asked Garp as the pages folded back and returned to the holder on Garp's belt. They roughly let go of his head and walked around him. You're just going to let him walk away? Garp was shaking, his muscles flexing against the chains as cracks began to appear around them, letting out animalistic growls. Death got back up to her feet. That's enough. She waved her hand and Luffy's wish was forcefully returned to the heavens. What will you give them? For all that they have taken from the world, from the kingdoms, from the people, from your family, from you? A cloaked woman appeared in front of Garp in a cloud of smoke. What will you give them? Garp uttered a single word softly as Death stormed towards him. She couldn't hear what he said, but she reached out her hand to grab at his soul, but he jumped away. As he slid across the ground, he looked at her with a blank expression. Garp, stop this. Death flexed her fingers. Don't make me have to fight you. The cracks spread out across the rest of the chains but they did not shatter. Garp stared at her blankly then rushed forward and kicked her in the side, crushing her arm beneath it and sending her flying back. She skipped across the ground a bit before coming to a rest. Her arm righted itself as she stood back up. Her 10 rings lifted from her fingers and hovered around her, transforming into 10 different weapons. Her earring detached itself and transformed into its trident form. She opened her mouth, and one of the 2 piercings detached and transformed into the skull and joined the other floating weapons. Garp simply observed her, but his fingers were flexing. She grabbed the final piercing of her tongue and took it off and it transformed into a bident. She looked at it sadly for a moment before sighing, I don't want to do this, Garp, but I will not repeat my mistakes. She let go of the bident and it hovered in front of her. The trident flipped around and its points lined up with the bidents before they closed around each other, creating a staff. The skull placed itself on top, and her spear and Ho Yi's bow lined up with it and then Tyr's sword placed itself between them. The test of the weapons circled around them as the weapons glowed. The form began to bend and curve as each weapon took its place. The weapon let out a shriek, a death rattle and death scythe was formed. It was decorated with the image of a 3-headed hound on the blade, with jewels and etchings along the hilt, ornate yet still practical and efficient. It fell into her hand and she gave it a twirl. If your soul falls to my side you will not re-enter into the reincarnation cycle for 1,000 million years. You will be banished from the heavens and hells, stuck in purgatory until your sentence fulfilled, she warned him. Will you yield? She pointed it at him, waiting for him to say something. Garp remained silent as he adjusted his stance, then rushed forward. Death sked and swung her scythe at him. He jumped up, used her scythe to jump again, then slammed his foot into Death's face, pushing her into the ground. Jumping off he kicked her into the air then kicked her away. As she flew through the air she was suddenly kicked again. She coughed up golden ichor as she fell to the ground. Looking up she saw Garp? But looking back she saw Garp standing where had initially kicked her. What? A synergy between a soul and its body while they are separated? That's next to impossible. She shakily stood back up. It's been a long time since I truly fought someone by myself. War would scold me for that. Let's shake that rust off. She ran at Garp's soul and slashed at him. He dodged to the side and then dodged again when she followed it up with a swipe. Garp's body kicked her in her back, pushing her into the ground. It stomped on her back twice before jumping away when she swung her scythe wildly at it. Getting back to her feet, Death took a deep breath. Looking back, she looked at the spirit and body standing shoulder to shoulder. Garp's body's arms hung limply, but the fingers were twitching. The pile of rubble it had been buried under was frozen in the air. Death cracked her neck but didn't move just yet. She walked to the side and the soul and body mirrored her. She dragged her scythe along the ground, creating a line behind her. She suddenly ran forward and brought the scythe up, the tip of it almost hitting Garp's soul's chin. He jumped back, his body jumping opposite. They both then rushed forward, and the soul kicked her high in the chest and the body kicked her in her legs. She flipped through the air from the force before she stopped and hovered in the air. Shaking her head, she let out a yell and rushed at the body. But then the soul jumped up and slammed down into her back and slammed her into the ground. This isn't me just being rusty. He knows my attacks. How does he know my attacks? Lightning struck at the soul, but it dodged away. Death, how the fuck is this happening? How is his soul out of his eternity? You didn't give up all of your training? How is he beating you? Sky asked as he hovered down and helped her stand back up. Cthulhu, the body and soul moving independently of each other, I don't fucking know. But he knows how I attack, how is that possible? Death questioned, but then they heard Garp let out a grunt. They both looked towards him as the soul began to step back into his body. The soul stretched and blurred as it re-entered its body. The chain bound the body's wrists behind its back, the eyes regaining light to them. What the fuck is going on? Sky hummed, we'll figure it out once we've collected his soul. He summoned Hofud, his old sword, to his hand. Wait, did you say Cthulhu? Now you hear that? Death yelled at him, but then Garp slammed his feet into both of their faces and slammed them into the ground. Sky dissipated into clouds and reappeared behind Garp and slashed at him. He fell to his knees and rolled to the side and swiped Sky's feet out from beneath him, then kicked at Death's knee, breaking it. He then jumped up and split his legs midair, kicking them both and sending them flying. This is like when war trained us, Sky compared as he stumbled back. He hid a smirk behind his hand as he rubbed some of his blood away. You okay, Garp? You're awfully quiet. Sky saw a spectral arm moving around his chest and another around his head. Well, that's a familiar sight. He's using his soul to manipulate his body. Death stood up, her knee righting itself with a sickening crack. His heart and mind, he's restarting his body. Garp moved around slightly like he was drunk, stumbling, head lobbing about, eyes becoming lidded. He bent over backwards and he took a deep, heavy, gasping breath, eyes suddenly wide open. Fucking 900 hells. He yelled out loudly, finally speaking since beginning this fight. Death tilted her head. What did he just say? She shook her head and rushed at him. Bringing her scythe down at his exposed chest, it should have been a sure hit, but he vanished, and her scythe embedded into the ground. She felt a small shock, her grip loosened on her weapon for the briefest moment, but she quickly tightened her grip. Sky looked to the side and observed Garp as he stood up and flexed his shoulders. His stance is different, he's hopping around on the tips of his feet. Hop, breathe, stretch, crack, clear, repeat, Garp muttered to himself, but the two gods could hear him. He cracked his neck, closed his eyes for 2 seconds, then opened them and began to hop again. He's not yet returned to the living, even then he still has to be collected. His fate is sealed and we can't go against it. Death spoke to herself, letting out a heavy sigh. Stop making this difficult, Garp. Sky lifted his hand to the skies and clouds began to coalesce above. Thunder rumbled beneath their surface and in an instant a massive blast of lightning shot at Garp. However, he made no attempts to dodge this time. The lightning hit him and Sky concentrated, keeping the lightning going on Garp. Wahahahahaha. Laughter? Sky jolted at the laugh. Garp walked out of the lightning, a giant smile on his face. He began hopping again, continuing to laugh. Well, time to change plans. Sky's skin bubbled and glowed as clouds leaked from his eyes. They encompassed him and it grew taller. His sword turned into clouds shaped like the weapon, and with a swipe of his free arm his new form was revealed. Broader, his eyes glowing sky blue, his lower half was just a cloud, but he was now as big as Kuma. Death stepped back slightly. Let's just get this over with. Her skin sunk as her flesh decayed and her suit transformed into a robe. Black smoke hovered out from where her feet were as she hovered slightly off the ground. Garp hopped one last time and rushed forward. Death slashed at him and Garp slid on his knees underneath it. Death held out her hand and several bones shot out at Garp. He jumped up and went higher and higher as the bones tried to restrain him. Sky shot after him and cut at him, slicing through the small tower of bones. Garp jumped onto the flat side of his sword and broke the chain, the restricting links dissolving in a bright light. Reeling his fist back he punched Sky, and in a flash of purple Sky was sent flying across Dressrosa, his body reverting to his true form. Falling down, Garp grabbed onto the bone tower and used it to twist himself through the air and slam his feet into Death as she shot at him. Her transformation was undone, and she coughed up golden ichor as she slammed into the ground. Garp sent himself into the air and slammed down onto the tower, and it fell apart. Slamming into the ground, rubble shot into the air from the force before freezing in place from the state of time. Death let out a groan. When music said you managed to revert her melody, I didn't think that would translate to my transformation too. She got back to her feet and cracked her neck. I'm really out of practice, let's try the bone trap again. She swiped her hand through the air and several giant bones shot out at the same time, caging Garp. Sky landed in Greenbit, son of a dash. He cut himself off as he stopped himself before he hit the Tontata village. Fucking hell's bell towers haven't been forcefully reverted like that since. Garp is clearly a god's reincarnation. Sky rubbed his chin as the bone cage exploded and Death let out a slew of Greek curses. But could he be the reincarnation of a god touched by eternity? Is he? Let's see. Cracking his jaw, Sky generated powerful winds and shot himself back towards the docks. He slashed at the empty air and created several wind cuts that shot at Garp. Garp barely registered them and danced out of the way of them while still dodging Death's attacks. Sky shot himself at Garp and pointed his sword straight forward, covering the tip in winds from the four guides. Garp suddenly kicked Death in the crotch, then kicked her scythe up and used it to deflect Sky's strike, slamming the tip of the scythe into the ground and kicking upwards, right into Sky's crotch. Death groaned from where she was bent over. Why did he go for there? She asked with a raised squeaky voice. Sky grunted. Well, this brings up some familiar memories from when I was in training. He referred to when he was prepped to become the watchman for Asgard, which required extensive training. We've really become rusty. Understatement. Garp yelled out, and in response both Sky and Death flipped him off. Sky shakily got back to his feet. What are you trying to do, Garp? No matter how well you face us, we can outlast you while you'll grow exhausted and drained. This will end up being a battle of attrition. Garp chuckled. I know, I've lived long enough to know when I'm fighting a losing fight, but that doesn't mean I'll give up. I'll keep fighting until my body gives out on me, and then I'll force it to keep going until I've won. Sky and Death's eyes widened at the familiar words. My family is in danger of losing who they are, and I let myself almost give up on saving them. You will need to drag me to hell, heaven, purgatory, fighting to the end. Death shook her head. So be it, Garp. She began to stalk towards him, but Sky held out his arm in front of her. Sky? Look at him, he wants you to attack. Sky narrowed his eyes. We can't run into this relying on our dash. In a flash of purple lightning, Garp rushed at them. Carving technique. He raised his hands flat as he got behind the two gods. Whetstone. He brought down both hands across their backs, but only the outside edge of them. It carved the flesh away, like a knife against a whetstone made of flesh. The gods coughed up blood as they fell. Finally got it, Captain Hallow. I was never going to master them until I mastered myself. He looked at his hands, sparking with purple lightning. How long has it been? Garp's hair began to grow longer, floating about. You tried to teach me, but I wasn't able to understand and appreciate your words. Thank you, Mom. A tear fell from his eye. Death and Sky cursed under their breaths in their native tongues as they once again got back to their feet. Sky? Death called out and Sky responded with a groan. Fuck you. Sky turned to look back at Garp. You know, let's just give up, this isn't worth the effort. Death looked at Sky with a bewildered look. I'm sorry, I think my ears are ringing a bit. Did you just suggest ignoring our laws? Sky shook his shoulders as his back healed and clothes fixed themselves. This is his only new chance at life. We'll limit ourselves here. Do better than with Emu. Death's eye twitched. You couldn't have said that before we got our asses kicked? She grabbed him by his collar and shook him. You get 3 minutes before we resume time, Garp. We gotta clean up around here, Sky said through the shaking Death was giving him. She slapped him upside the head before raising her hand, and all of the bone fragments floated into the air and condensed into a sphere that fell into her hand. Seems I'm handling the blood. Garp looked towards Punk Hazard, seeing the remains of the ice giant. Letting out a deep breath, he got into a running position. As Sky used the winds to manipulate the waters to clean up the blood, Garp covered his body in the purple lightning. Closing his eyes for a second, his hair standing on end, he started running. In a flash of purple, he started running across the water, taking advantage of its frozen state to generate friction. And time unfroze. What the? Doflamingo yelled out as the docks exploded and water drenched some of his crew members. Kazan looked at the incoming cannonballs, his hands shaking as he tried to concentrate, but he was exhausted. He closed his eyes. "Seem this is it, I'm sorry everyone." Garp hit the frozen grounds of Punk Hazard, a massive split in the sea behind him from where he had been running. He slid to a stop in front of Kazan, the view of the two of them obscured due to the cannonballs. And he attacked. "Kazan?" Alvia yelled out from the ship. Sarah's looked at Punk Hazard in horror, before her enhanced sight saw the split in the sea. "Captain?" Kong stood off to the side, taking out a cigar and cutting off the tip. Lighting a match, he lit it and took a long drag from it. "Don't stop," he ordered the ships. He heard the sound of shattering. "Must be trying to block the attack," he hummed. He went to take another drag of the cigar, but his eyes widened as a cannonball shot past him in the wrong direction. It hit one of the firing ships and sunk it. "Cease firing." He sent out the order, and after one more salvo they ceased firing. From the cloud that had been built up, Kong could only see a shape of someone standing tall, cannonballs littering the ground, some shattered, broken in half, and others buried far into the ground. As the smoke cleared, the first thing Kong saw was an extended fist, what was once a glove hanging in tatters from the wrist, the knuckles broken and bleeding, the faintest sight of bone could be seen. Dripping to the ground, the blood stained the pristine ground beneath. The smoke cleared and revealed to Kong's shock Garp standing in front of Kazan, an arc of cannonballs in front of him, leaving all that was behind him undamaged. "What?" Kong yelled out. "Garp." Kazan smiled, seeing his captain. Garp grabbed him and ran right past Kong and across the sea. He grabbed onto one of the remaining ships that had fired onto Kazan, used it to jump off of, cracking it in half. He did the same to the other ship and rocketed towards the granting wish. Grabbing onto the ladders on the side, he jumped onto the deck and put Kazan down. The purple lightning crackled around him as Garp continued moving, jumping over the opposite side, and fired at an incoming ship, breaking through it and firing in an arc around his ship. He landed back on Punk Hazard in half a minute, leaving sinking ships behind him. "Kong!" he yelled out, his anger coming out. "Alabasta." Cobra looked at the broadcast of the battle going on at Dressrosa with a creased brow. If he was willing to kill someone secretly, how many more has he killed? "Father, how is he still standing?" Vivi looked at Garp, bloody, bruised, yet standing tall and proud. Cobra shook his head, but then he heard something shattering behind him. "What?" He stood up fast and looked behind his throne towards the hidden passage. Running to it, he opened the door and ran down the hallway past the carvings. Vivi was hot on his tail as he entered the room, to see the stone that the Guando had been stabbed into for centuries, was broken. The Guando was hovering in the air, the blade pointing upward. "How is it doing that?" Vivi asked, her eyes wide. The Guando suddenly flew past the king and princess, shooting through the throne and out into the sky, faster than the eye could see. "Where is it going?" "Dressrosa." Kong tightened his grip on his staff. "How are you alive?" he asked Garp. "That electricity, no, that's lightning, it's just like the electro the minks possess," he observed. He had fought a few minks in the past, but he had never seen their electro be any color other than blue or heard of such a thing either. "Simple." Garp's fists tightened. "I refuse to stop here. I have a goal and I intend to see it done. Killing you was already part of that, avenging Yumi is just a bonus." He's of sound mind, so he managed to break out of his berserker state. Kong tilted his head. "Really? Well then, perhaps you'd like to know that dash." Garp cut him off with a punch to the gut and sent him flying back. "You're the one who planned Captain Hallow's murder," Garp said, flexing his hand. "It's not hard to figure out once you told me you're the one who killed Yumi. So how many was it?" Garp asked as he stalked towards Kong, who got back to his feet. "How many people did you murder to keep your precious status quo?" "Enough," Kong spat out. He rushed at Garp and hit him once with his staff, sweeping his legs out from beneath him. Garp bent his arms and stopped his descent and drop-kicked Kong. Flipping over, he tackled Kong through several frozen trees and then slammed him into the ground. Kong grunted and slammed his staff into the ground, and balancing on it he kicked Garp in the chest several times and infused his final kick with hockey and sent him flying back. Kong panted as he stood. "Are you really not angry I killed the closest thing you had to a mother? Or your wife?" "Wahahahahaha." Garp laughed. "Oh Kong," his smile radiated bloodlust, the purple lightning sparking around him, his hockey fluctuating. "You can't comprehend how angry I am. The only ones who could were Death and Luffy's Wish, for they had seen what the book had shown. His granddaughter he had not had a chance to meet killed young, his unborn great-grandchildren killed before they could see the sun and moon, and no doubt there were other ways Kong hurt Luffy during his mission to capture him. Garp had even more family to protect now. I'm going to rip your head off." His laugh dash Garp uppercut Kong and sent him into the air, then jumped after him and axe kicked him back into the ground. As he fell, he raised his fists and slammed them down where Kong was, but he had managed to roll out of the way. However, he was launched into the air slightly as the crater was made. Garp slid across the ground and punched him, sending him flying back as he coughed up blood. Garp rolled his shoulders as he calmly walked forward. "What will we do with a drunken sailor?" He began to sing, "What will we do with a drunken sailor? What will we do with a drunken sailor?" Kong's eyes widened at the familiar melody. Early in the morning, Kong sent several pieces of cannonballs at him, but Garp easily dodged them. Way hey and up she rises. Garp slammed his knee into Kong's face. Way hey and up she rises. Kong struggled against the grip on his head. Garp slammed it into the ground twice. Way hey and up she rises. Garp kicked him in the face and sent him skipping across the ground like a stone across water. Early in the morning, Garp's singing was calm, even haunting. Shave his belly with a rusty razor. He jumped over Kong's attack at his legs and kicked him back. Shave his belly with a rusty razor. He kicked half a cannonball at him, which Kong was barely able to dodge. It moved so fast. Shave his belly with a rusty razor. Early in the morning, way hey and up she rises. Kong jumped back as Garp tried to axe kick him. A new crater created. Way hey and up she rises. Kong kicked an intact cannonball up and batted it at Garp with his staff, but Garp caught it. Way hey and up she rises. Garp spun around and threw it right back at Kong. Early in the morning, Kong slammed his staff into the ground and created several cracks in the ice. Put him in a long boat till he's sober. Garp stomped his foot and the cracks arced around him, shattering and shifting the ice upward. Put him in a long boat till he's sober. Put him in a long boat till he's sober. Garp stomped his foot again and the fractured ice shot into the air. He raised his hand and the lightning arced out and through all of the ice shards. He moved his hand down and the pieces of ice flew at Kong. Early in the morning, this was a song that was uniquely special to Garp. Way hey and up she rises. Kong felt himself begin to panic as Garp reached this point in the song. Way hey and up she rises. He launched a fallen tree at Garp, but he slapped it to the side. Way hey and up she rises. Garp, Sengoku, Tsuru and Yumi had sung this song just before Yumi went into labor, early in the morning. But they hadn't finished it behind this verse. Yumi had just finished singing when Kong's poison kicked in. Stick him in a barrel with a hosepipe on him. Garp summoned Nemia, who had grown to 10 times her size and crackled with lightning. She blocked a salvo of cannonballs that had been fired from one of the ships at Garp. Stick him in a barrel with a hosepipe on him. Nemia grabbed one of the cannonballs in her mouth and with an electrified roar fired it right back at the ship, sinking it. Stick him in a barrel with a hosepipe on him. Early in the morning, Nemia growled at Kong from behind Garp, towering over the both of them. Way hey and up she rises. Garp scratched her chin as his eyes tried to burn a hole through Kong. Way hey and up she rises. Kong felt his hands shake slightly. He gripped them tightly around his staff. Way hey and up she rises. Early in the morning. You think you can win, Garp? Kong yelled at him. Doesn't matter how many times you get back up, I'll put you back down. Put him in the bed with the captain's daughter. Put him in the bed with the captain's daughters. Put him in the bed with the captain's daughter. Garp showed no reaction to Kong's words. They meant nothing. Early in the morning, Kong thrust his staff at Garp, but he stepped to the side and avoided it. Way hey and up she rises. Garp hit him with a sumo slap and pushed him into the side of a mountain. Way hey and up she rises. Way hey and up she rises. Garp kicked at him, but he fell to the ground and avoided the hit, but the mountain was cut from the ground. Early in the morning, Kong tried to attack Garp, but he flipped over the attack and picked up the mountain. That's what we do with a drunken sailor. That's what we do with a drunken sailor. Kong retreated as Garp neared the end of the song. That's what we do with a drunken sailor. Garp threw the mountain at Kong. Early in the morning, Kong infused hockey into his staff to thrust it forward, hitting the mountain before it hit him and shattering it. Way hey and up she rises. Garp, however, had jumped after the mountain and punched out as it shattered, hitting Kong and slamming him into the ground. Way hey and up she rises. Way hey and up she rises. He kicked Kong and he flew, hitting his shoulder on a frozen tree. Early in the morning, Kong let out a grunt of pain. He glared at Garp before his eyes widened in horror. The smoke kicked up from the shattered ice-covered Garp and he looked like a vengeful deity. Way hey and up she rises. Way hey and up she rises. Way hey and up she rises. Early in the morning, Garp finally finished the song after so many years. If you think singing changes dash. I swore to never finish our song until I knew I could kill Yumi's murderer. Garp interrupted him. It was her favorite shanty. She was always humming it, singing parts of it randomly, and she never got a chance to finish it because of you. She sang it to Dragon so many times as she carried him. Garp teared up at the memories. I couldn't bring myself to sing it to him, to give him something from his mother he could always carry with him. You took my son's mother from him. You took my wife from me. Nemia's lips curled as she growled, crouching down ready to pounce at Kong and tear him apart. What gave you the right to kill anyone you killed? You. Garp wiped the tears away. You were once the closest thing I ever had to a father before I saw what you were truly like. Then do the right thing for your father and let me discipline you. Kong tried to manipulate those feelings. Garp glared at him. Those feelings are long dead. He rushed forward, his fist reeled back to strike. Kong raised his staff to block the attack, but then Garp bit down on it, shattering it. He spit out the shards within his mouth at Kong's right eye. They pierced into it, blinding it. Garp stuck out his middle finger from his fist, still raised to attack, and stuck it into Kong's left ear, deafening it. Kong screamed in pain as he wrenched his head away, ripping part of his ear off as he did so. Stumbling back, he dropped both halves of his staff to the ground, gripping at both ruined halves of two of his senses. Fuck. I don't know what to focus on. Carving technique. Garp rushed at him, his hands flat like when he had cut sky and death. Kong reacted slower than he should have. Top. Garp's hands were like blades as they cut through flesh. Kong's remaining eye widened in pain as his left pinky and ring fingers alongside part of his hand were cut off, and the same happened to his right with his middle, index, and thumb and part of his hand. He let out a bloody scream, focusing on the pain and not Garp, who was now behind him. Carving technique. Garp rushed at him from behind. Guts? He cut at Kong's sides, nearly carving out his guts with the attack, but he intentionally cut shallower than what the technique typically cut. Kong coughed up blood as Garp reappeared in front of him, lightning crackling along him. A stripe of purple appeared in his beard, then a stripe of blue in his hair, then a stripe of yellow and red opposite the blue. Carving technique. Kong's eye shook in fear, recognizing the series of attacks as a series of 3 that Captain Hallow was famous for, but he had no clue that she had taught the technique of carving to Garp. It was unknown where the technique of carving originated from, so few people were able to use. At its most basic fundamental, it teaches how to turn your hands into blades, to be able to cut with your flesh. The techniques could be translated to other weapons, and no matter how blunt they were with these techniques, they could cut. It was unknown what quality allowed these people to use the series of techniques, but there was only ever 2 seen at a time, a master and their student. New techniques were added on with each new student creating them, the last ones being taught the ones the master created. The reason why there were only ever 2 was simple. Each practitioner of the technique of carving was a part of a unique and rare species, the name of it lost to time. The one thing that each member of this species was aware of was one thing: they were not fully human. Part of their blood was of another species. The more blood of species that ran through their veins, the harder a time they had mastering the technique of carving, as they had to master parts of their heritage. While she never told him her thoughts, Captain Hallow had her suspicions of the species that were part of Garp's heritage. Garp's foot dug into the ground, cracking it beneath him. The blood of giants. He grit his teeth, and suddenly a new pair of much sharper teeth appeared in front of his normal teeth. The blood of fishmen. The lightning crackled around him as his hair floated and shadowed his eyes. The blood of minks. The muscles of his legs and arms tensed and flexed, the bones not broken despite the attack that killed him that would have broken the limbs of others. The blood of the long-legged and long-armed tribes. Those were the only species she had been able to identify, but there were other qualities of his. From his biology to his behavior, there were qualities that no human, no matter how bizarre they could be, would have, yet Garp exhibited them. Garp rushed forward, a bloody wide smile on his face like that of a demon's jack-o'-lantern. Kong screamed as a smiling face, like that which would be carved into a pumpkin by so many, was carved into his chest. Blood spurted out from the cuts like a flame's light as he stumbled forward, eyes white in pain. Captain Hallow was the most well-known practitioner of the technique of carving, and while it was known she had taken Garp on as a student as a Marine, both of them had kept it secret that she taught him the technique of carving, until now. Kong nearly fell over, his pain was so great, but he forced himself to stay standing. Garp rushed at him to give the final attack, but Kong fell forward and kicked out. Imbuing the attack with all of his hockey, he kicked Garp high into the air, higher than Bogart and Kizaru flew. Die. Garp the traitor. Kong yelled out. Garp twisted and turned as he flew through the air, but then he heard something. Turning to look, he saw something flying towards him as he flew higher and higher. Pieces of stone were around the fast-moving object as it neared him. His eyes widened as he saw what it was. A guando. Garp smirked as he reached out, and it flew softly into his hand. He used its momentum and righted himself in the air. Swinging it up as he began to fall, Garp infused it with his haki and his lightning coursed around it. The black blade, one that no one had heard of or seen, shined brightly for all to see. Garp let out a roar, and Kong's teeth began to knock against each other in fear. Strike of Charybdis. Garp's voice echoed out as he hit the center of the island. The island was split in half, then again the opposite way, then two circles of force cut each quarter into three, the image of a whirlpool invoked. Kong almost fell as the island shook and rocked about, the pieces of the ice giant falling and becoming bridges. What is this? He yelled out, panicking. Garp stood on the sinking center of the island, the guando of Guan Yu held tightly. And then the world was tinted red from a wave of haki, covering not just Punk Hazard but Dressrosa and all of the ships. Kong shook, his teeth clacking against each other, his eye turning every which way, his remaining fingers unable to unclench. This was not Conqueror's haki, no, this was something completely different. It may operate on a similar pattern of behavior, but this is something dangerous, something primal. This was the bloodlust of a king, a form of haki unknown to the wide world, thanks in no small part to the world government suppressing knowledge of it and the other types of haki similar to Conqueror's. After all, Roger being a master of 3 types of haki already made his reputation more powerful. If it was known he knew others, then Roger would become more dangerous to their balance. Instead of knocking out the opponents, it drove them to their most primal fears to get away from the one using the bloodlust of a king. Just as quick as it had come, it centered around Garp, folding around him, but it had already affected the Marines. While most were frozen in fear, others screamed and abandoned ship, swimming away while screaming their voices hoarse. Kong stepped back as he looked at Garp. This was nowhere near what he had thought could possibly happen. Garp stepped onto solid ground as the center of the island fully sank, creating a lake. Letting out a pathetic scream, Kong turned around and began to run to the edge of the island. Garp hefted the guando and threw it, and it flew right past Kong. He missed. The guando flew towards one of the ships. Fisher Tiger was fighting the Marines on it when he saw the incoming weapon. He leaped up and caught and spun through the air, cutting the ship into pieces and cutting gashes into the hulls of the 2 nearby ships. He then threw it into the sky towards Bogard. Bogard threw his swords up and caught the guando and covered the blade in flames. Rapidly he increased the heat as he swung it at Kizaru, until just before it hit the Admiral, the flames turned to magma. The force and heat of the strike as it hit Kizaru sent him flying back, and he crashed into the furthest ship which Akainu was on. He then threw it towards the granting wish. Kuzan jumped over the side and grabbed it, freezing the sea beneath him, and with an upward slash of the weapon sent out a monumentally sized glacier that encased the remaining Marine ships attacking the granting wish. Kong looked at the decimation of the fleet of experimental ships that he had gotten as he kept running. In under a minute the 3 crew members had saved the granting wish from having to continue the battle. Garp was close behind him and held out his hand, and the guando flew from Kazan's hand to him. As it landed in Garp's hand, a bullet shot into Kong's knee, and in the next instant Garp had cut his legs off. From the crow's nest of the furthest ship, Tsuru lowered her rifle. "That's for Kajaka, you fuck." Kong screamed out as he fell to the ground. He crawled, trying to get closer to the sea, a trail of blood behind him. No, 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 no. I can't die here. I am favored by the 5 elders, the gods of our world. He begged, crawling closer to the water. Suddenly the guando was stabbed into the ground close to his head and he let out a yelp. Garp pressed one of his feet down into his back, standing above him with a shadowed expression. "Beg all you want, no one will save you." Kong cried out as Garp struck his head. Garp then gripped both his hands around Kong's head, and his earlier promise was remembered. Kong reinforced his neck with armament haki. "No. Garp, stop." Garp began to pull and Kong pulled all of his haki into protecting his neck. "Stop. Don't do this, please." He tried to grab at Garp's hands, but with his ruined hands he couldn't pry anything off. "Garp, please, stop." Garp let out a roar as he pulled harder, and despite all the haki, Kong's neck tore apart. With sickening rip, Garp tore Kong's head from his body with Kong screaming, "No!" Garp held the head up, and the entire world saw the frozen expression of fear on Kong's face, his mouth open mid-scream. He had bested another fleet admiral, this time killing the leader of the Marines. He tossed the head up, caught it, and then threw it like he would a cannonball. It crashed into the closest Marine ship, bringing the remaining number of Marine ships down to 5. He kicked Kong's body into the sea, and Nemia dropped Kong's severed pieces of his hands and his legs into the sea right after. Garp picked up his new weapon and looked to the sky, letting out a deep breath. "I'm sorry we couldn't finish our duet, Yumi. I'm sorry I couldn't sing it to our son. Tears fell that he quickly rubbed away. Nemia comfortingly rubbed her head against him, letting out a purr. She would have loved you, Nemia. Garp pet the spectral lion, smiling at her, with 2 rows of teeth now, but it still held the same kindness behind it. His gaze suddenly shifted outwards. Akainu shivered, feeling something staring at him. Looking behind, he could see Punk Hazard in the distance, and Garp, tiny at this distance, standing at the edge of the shattered island. A roar echoed out and the sea split apart as Garp flew at him. Sakazuki! Akainu stepped back. Dive? Kizaru yelled out, get us as deep as possible into the sea. The Marines immediately began to go beneath the deck as part of the deck folded in and the mast collapsed, entering from where it had shot out. Activate the auto-coding. Start diving immediately. Kizaru grabbed Akainu and pushed him towards the ladder leading below deck, but Akainu was frozen in fear. I'm going to feed you your own heart. Garp roared out as he used the debris of the destroyed ships to get closer. The remaining 5 ships began to sink beneath the waves, but Akainu hadn't moved despite Kizaru's efforts. The coating covered them both as Garp sunk one of the 5 ships, jumping off of it. Tsuru casually walked past the 2 admirals and got below deck as Garp destroyed another ship, getting closer. Their ship began to go beneath waves as Garp used the ship to their left to jump towards them, his hand reaching out. The ship sunk further beneath and Garp shot past them, but he managed to grab something. Slamming into the other ship, Garp stood on the sinking wreckage, holding Akainu's admiral's coat tightly in his fist. Nemia let out a roar, reflecting her master's anger at missing Akainu by such a closeness. Lightning coursed over his fist and the coat caught fire, rapidly burning away. Garp took a deep breath, wahahaha, and he laughed. The back of his new coat glowed slightly, his eyes gaining a new light to them that had been lost for years. How long has it been? Garp asked out loud. Feels like centuries, but I did it. Are you there, Mom? I kept my promise to you. I never used any weapons to fight until I mastered your techniques. I'm sorry it took so long. Garp rolled his shoulders, examining his new weapon. Hello, old friend, Garp whispered. With a smirk he covered himself in lightning, the stripes of color returning to his hair as he did so, and started running across the water towards Dressrosa. Violet. Status report. Doflamingo yelled out as he and his crew made a tactical retreat out of the docks. Kong is dead, the Marines have fully retreated, Garp is coming towards us, so is his ship, Viola reported. He's what? Gladius yelled out when they all heard stone shattering from the docks. Were you at Doflamingo? Garp yelled out as he slowly walked up the steps into view. Oh, there you are, Garp chuckled as he looked at them. What are you doing all the way over there? We came here to fight you originally, feels wrong to not do it before leaving. You just came out of fighting Kong. Do you really think you can face us in your condition? Doflamingo asked. He hated having to retreat like that, but the docks were too damaged to safely fight on them, and within the kingdom there were more places for him to pull his tricks. Garp rolled his eyes as he walked forward. Kong is one thing you? Honestly, I'd compare it to when I fought Virgo. He went down in 2 hits. Garp scratched behind his ear as the family's eyes widened at the reveal. I'd gone to the North Blue as I was thinking about what to do. My habit of always getting into a fight kicked in and I ended up on Minion Island. Saw him trying to kill some civilian and his kid, talking about traitors or something? Or was he talking about witnesses? Doflamingo's smile fell. 2 hits and he fell, and I'm stuck thinking. Actually, what happened to those 2 he was trying to kill? They just ran off, hope they're okay. So Rosinante is alive and so is Law, Doflamingo thought to himself, but this event had happened years ago so he had no idea where they could be. They could be anywhere, there weren't any reports of them being with Garp, and he seems to have only even been able to keep the secret that his wife was a revolutionary. I don't think he's lying here, he's too casual with his body language. Anyway, I'm stuck with it though. How many times have I found Marines like him who put on a mask of kindness but are cold-hearted killers? How many corrupt Marines had I put away or tried to get put on trial only for them to get away? Apathetic, uncaring, malicious. In all my time as a Marine, how much had I truly been able to do to fix the corruption of the Marines? Garp sighed, and there is this bright upcoming recruit that even I had hoped for, trying to murder a father and his child, knocked out at my feet, and I come to a realization. So I took his gun and shot him in the head, executing him. I made my choice with that act. I would no longer be a Marine, no longer work for the world government. I'd be who I wanted to be but had denied myself for too long. Doflamingo grit his teeth at the revelation. So he's the reason we have to be more careful with our underworld operations. He's dead. Wahar. I'm honestly surprised they never linked Virgo's death to me. It's been bothering me that they didn't know, Garp laughed. Now I'm just reminiscing, sorry. Garp vanished from their sight for a moment, then reappeared right in front of them, kicked Doflamingo in the chest and sending him flying back. Young master! Baby 5 yelled out. She turned her arms into machine guns and rapidly fired at Garp. Garp let go of his guando and his hands blurred in front of him. When Baby 5 stopped firing, Garp dropped 2 chunks of metal to the ground, the bullets she had fired at him. If you're going to fire at me, be a bit smarter about where you fire from. Garp raised an eyebrow as he moved slightly, Senor Pink appearing from the ground and punching at him. Garp moved with the motion as if he was struck, and to everyone observing he was, except for Senor Pink. This isn't good. Senor Pink was able to think before Garp fell on his back and kicked him underneath the chin, kicking him into one of the buildings. He then hopped right back onto his feet and used his gondo to block a sword strike from Diamante. Jumping up, he used the sword to jump higher up, and right to where Machvice was floating in the air ready to attack. Machvice gasped, and Garp cut him across the chest and sent him flying. Landing back to the ground, Garp let out a sigh. Okay, what was the trick again? He muttered to himself, playing with the cuff of his coat. He dodged out of the way of a kick from Lao Ji and kicked him in the back. Did I miss anything from the prison? No. Eden, are you active right now? You did not forget anything, sir. Do you wish to have access to the key? Eden asked, glowing in response as Garp laughed. I will assume you don't want that. It has been quite some time since you last used your coat. It is clear you wish to reacquaint with it on your own. Is that Bracer talking? Diamante asked, looking at Garp like he was insane. Insaner. I was just finishing preparations for repairs. Is there anything you require before I power down for a few days, sir? Yeah, stay active for just a bit longer for me. I'll need your help with something soon. Garp smirked as Machvice hovered over him and increased his weight, only to be shot away by a paw strike from Kuma. We'll wrap up here soon enough. Transfer what data you know of the old into my mind, he whispered to Eden. I've got a theory and I know you'd love to piss off Death. The chance to piss off Persephone, say less. Garp laughed as his crew gathered around him, Kazan to his left and Bogart to his right. All right everyone, pick your dance partners and make sure to have fun. Garp attacked Diamante and punched him, sending him flying back. I call dibs on the executives and Doflamingo. Kuma sighed, I'm just glad he's okay. He won't be once I get my hands on him. Lami yelled out. He's injured and he's running around like an idiot. She dodged an incoming kick, then stabbed a syringe into the attacking Dellinger's crotch. Paralysis, bitch. Diamante dodged out of the way of one of Garp's incoming attacks, only to be viciously kicked in the side and launched through several walls, right into the Colosseum. What is with this guy? Diamante groaned out as he got up, holding onto his side in pain. Looking at the hole in the Colosseum, he cursed. That's gonna be a pain to fix, He looked in the distance and saw a literal wall of blood appear. What the? That'd be Sarah's, Garp said from behind him. She's got these attacks where she basically becomes a human blender. It is vicious. Diamante looked at him with contempt. You're in my house now. Garp jumped and landed on the platform in the middle of the arena. And you don't care? Great, Diamante grumbled, not used to facing an opponent who simply didn't care that they were fighting him. Diamante joined him down in the arena, his sword out and his free hand gripping his cape. You've never fought a gladiator before. I used to be a gladiator in my youth before the arena was burned down, and I have fought gladiators before, Garp corrected, patting his coat down. Damn it, where did I put it? Diamante sked and rushed at him, slashing downwards, but Garp moved out of the way, practically ignoring him as he checked his coat's pockets. Look for your keys later. Diamante snapped at him, using his powers to create ripples in the arena, but Garp didn't have any trouble moving across the moving terrain. Suddenly he felt something in an inner pocket and smirked. Will you finally take this fight seriously? Diamante yelled out, a vein throbbing on his forehead. When did I start having fun with you? Garp asked teasingly, taking out a small key. It looked like a key, but it was ridiculously small. The fact that Garp was able to hold onto it was nothing short of a miracle. Not even a Tontata would consider it bigger than their arms. Garp put the key into his left cufflink and turned it, and then it shattered. All that effort looking, and for what exactly? You broke the key, Diamante mocked. Garp laughed. Wahar. You don't know anything. You're an egotistical idiot who only thinks with his sword. Let me guess though, you like to call yourself a genius to help with that crippling self-doubt you got, and you just love to bully the gladiators you have imprisoned here because it makes you feel big and strong? Garp returned the mockery tenfold. The lock was put in place. Right, I had to store it there, and since Zeus couldn't be executed yet because his power was still being drained. Glad to see the key still responded to me. Garp's thoughts turned strangely, at least to those that could hear it. To him, they were the most normal things to think. Diamante grit his teeth in rage and whipped his sword at Garp. As it twisted towards him, Garp stepped off the edge of the arena and into the waters infested with fighting fish. The fuck? Diamante sputtered. Is he trying to get himself killed? From the shadows, Sky and Death hid, heavily bruised and still healing. Why are we still here? Death asked Sky. I'd rather be snacking on ambrosia and nectar than being here. Garp is alive with a new chance. What more are you trying to do, Sky? Sky put his finger to his lips. Just watch, the show's about to begin. He smirked as a light began to glow from the waters, and then a ring of fire erected from the waters all around as red as blood. Samadhi fire? Death gasped. Garp jumped back onto the platform, a cooked fighting fish in hand that already had a few bites out. Ah, red boy, Garp shook his head fondly. If only he had been given more time to develop his skills, he would have been able to use these flames without having to hurt himself. Garp chuckled, taking another bite out of the fish. On the back of his coat a symbol appeared. It had the appearance of a horned child. He raised his hand and the flames dissipated. So, how fierce are these so-called fighting fish? They've got quite the reputation, but I don't think I've seen any except these coward fish. That's the coat of the West, that's War's coat. Death realized. How is he able to use its gifts? The powers bound to War's soul, a lock placed upon it when she had to store it away as she accepted her position as a member of the new pantheon. The answer is simple. Sky smiled widely. Eve's soul entered into the cycle, and Garp is her current life. And he just regained some of his memories of his past life. Nororororo. He laughed, slapping his knee. I knew he was the reincarnation of a god, but to think he's a member of the Eternity Pantheon, and not only that but one of those with an eternity, the odds of all of this, fate finally is kind to us. You fed a devil fruit to your coat? Diamante stepped back, putting distance between them. I've never heard of that, only ever weapons. I need to warn Daffy. Pika came out from the walls of the Colosseum and launched himself at Garp. You'll pay for attacking our family, Garp. He yelled out. Garp snickered at Pika's high-pitched voice as another symbol of a fat monk appeared on the back of his coat, and a pair of bronze symbols appeared, hanging from his coat's waist. He threw them up and they grew to a massive size. Garp slammed them shut, trapping Pika within. Man, you've got a funny voice, wahahaha. Pika slammed against the symbols but he couldn't get out. Don't bother, Maitreya designed them himself. Garp adjusted his coat as he kicked his boots together, and a pair of wheels appeared that spun around on, finding his balance. Death looked at Garp in surprise. Garp? Is War? Oh, fuck me, I flirted with War. Death dry heaved. I actually said I wanted War. She kept heaving while Sky laughed at her. I flirted with my sister in arms, fuck me. Ah, the windfire wheels of Naja, it feels good to be on them again. Garp smirked as the wheels ignited and he kicked the sealed symbols up and jumped up, keeping the symbols on sideways. Let's play. The wheels began to turn, and the turned symbols began to spin, Pika screaming within as he was knocked around. Come on, Diamante. Show me what you got. The symbols began to spin, rolling across the ground with Garp on top. Oh, fuck you. Diamante yelled at him as he turned and ran out of the Colosseum, Garp right after him on top of the flaming symbols. Diamante ran past the rest of the family fighting the Constellation crew, screaming several curses at Garp. Garp waved at his crew as he rode past them. Alvia looked at Garp ride on the symbols, then looked at Kazan. Once you think you see everything with him. Kazan shook his head. I gave up thinking I know anything about Garp a long time ago. Were you running? Garp laughed at Diamante as he followed after him, Pika's screams echoing from the symbols. Moving his feet to manipulate the positioning of the windfire wheels gave him the appearance of dancing on top of the symbols as they chased after Diamante, tearing up the streets. Eden, are you ready? I am indeed. Eden was cut off when in a blast of drums Maman Bridget appeared between the symbols and Diamante and thrust her blade out, manipulating its size to fit into the lining of the symbols, then forcing them apart, freeing Pika from them, and Garp was sent flying. Garp landed on the wheels and skated around. Maman Bridget, now this is a surprise. Garp rested his guando on his shoulder, smirking at the god in disguise. So what's the occasion? Here for a party? Those are Najas, and that's the coat of the West. Is that Eden? Nothing about her betrayed her thoughts as she returned her blade to its original shape. Your melody has changed. Am I still speaking to Garp? Wahahaha. Garp laughed at the question. I am who I should have always been, no longer held back by any of my chains. I am truly myself. Maman Bridget's eyes widened slightly before a wide smile grew. Let me show you. The wheels retracted into his boots and Garp rushed at her and thrust his guando forward. Bridget deflected it and Garp moved with the motion and kicked her in the side of her head. Bridget stumbled as Garp slammed down into the unconscious Pika's stomach. He took a swig of his drink and then breathed out fire at him, which he countered with a burst of samadhi fire. He picked up one of the symbols and threw it like a discus at her. Bridget made her arms bigger and grabbed it out of air and threw it right back at him. Garp grabbed the other symbol and grabbed the other and they shrunk back to normal size, and he returned them to his coat's waist. Lifting his free hand to his mouth, he let out a slow breath as another symbol began to glow on his back, a rat. It stopped glowing as Diamante attacked him from behind. As it hit, Garp dissipated into a ball of black wind. It flew around, hitting Diamante square in the chest before flying higher into the air and transforming back into Garp. Garp experienced weightlessness for a moment, the symbol of a bear glowing on his back. "I've missed this feeling," Garp whispered to himself as he began to fall. "Need anything, Garp?" Bogart asked, free-falling with him. "Go collect the fruit and the bag of fruits, then come find me," Garp ordered as he clicked his heels together and the wheels rebuilt themselves. He twisted in the air and slid across the buildings, up to the rooftops. He ran across the city, a field of flowers his sole focus. "Thanks for the information, Eden. Let's see if we can make death curse us out." Eden let out what sounded like a laugh. "Guarded-eated-dead-eated. My pleasure to give aid, sir." Landing at the field, Garp looked around until he zeroed in on a lone tree. "There you are." Garp walked towards it, relaxed as if he were on a hike instead of in the middle of a battle. He dodged to the side and grabbed a bunch of strings that had been lashed out at him. Giving a quick pull on them before Doflamingo could disconnect them, the warlord was pulled towards him. Garp grabbed him by the head and slammed him into the ground several times. "You done?" "Great, figured we'd talk about Corazon since none of the cameras can hear us right now." Doflamingo stiffened at that. To think Virgo was the mysterious Corazon of your 4 executives, figuring that out was a surprise. So he doesn't know anything about Rosinante, he's figuring out outdated information, Doflamingo thought as he got back to his feet as Garp backed away. "Damn it, anytime I think I'll get something that'll tell me where the Opope fruit could be, it just goes wrong. What of it? Just makes me wonder what other undercover agents you could have." Garp shrugged. He chuckled softly. "You know, it's strange. Your father was given a proper burial, well, at least his head was. He was kind, caring, but damn was he naive, not understanding the cruelty the celestial dragons inflicted on the common people. It's frustrating, parents failing you. My actual father and mother, the ones who put the 2 pieces together that gave birth to me," Garp clarified, "abandoned me when I was young enough. I don't remember anything about them, their voices, their hair, nothing. Then the man who became my father figure for a time got the woman who I saw as my mother killed, then the love of my life, and I'm certain some of my friends that I just haven't figured out yet." "Is there a point?" Doflamingo sked. "The point is, your father failed you because he didn't understand money, illness, cruelty, or any of the rules of the real world, while both of my fathers had an understanding of enough of the rules of the world and used them to fail me. What I'm getting is that you're a giant man-child who was so spoiled he has no understanding of kindness or love, and no matter what you say about your feelings for your crew, you just want the world to burn no matter who ends up hurt. You'd kill any member of your crew with a smile if it meant you got closer to your end goal." Garp sighed. "Can you name one person you truly love, any kind of love, that you would hurt your end goal to help, save or protect?" Doflamingo laughed. "So what, they understand my feelings and accept it." Garp looked at him with pity. "Maybe, but will they truly still stand beside you in the end?" Garp held his hand up and the rat symbol glowed and a yellow tornado shot out of his palm and launched Doflamingo back. "Samadhi wins, so useful." Garp turned and gazed upon the grave. "Rika Scarlet, you had such a small dream to simply live with your family away from the politics. Let's give you a second chance at that." Bogart landed behind him, a bag of fruits in hand and a chest in the other. "Here they are, Garp." Garp grabbed the chest and opened it, taking the Rise fruit out. Bridget jumped into the field and Doflamingo swung up from where he had landed from the blast of Samadhi winds. Bridget's eyes widened at the sight of the fruits. He's going to eat it again? He's already halved his remaining life twice and just managed to come back from the brink. If he eats it a 3rd time, he's really dead. How do I warn him though he doesn't? What the fuck are those 2 doing here? Bridget tried not to focus on death and sky hidden in the distance among the field of flowers. Are those bruises? How the fuck did they get hurt? Okay, just focus on Garp, figure out how to save him, maybe figure out how to get Caesar hit in the dick, keep the plan with him steady. What are you trying to do, Garp? Eating a devil fruit doesn't seem necessary for this fight. Bogart stood between the 2 and drew his swords. This hasn't been a fight, he's using you as training dummies. Garp opened his mouth and ate the devil fruit in 2 bites. Stabbing his guando into the ground, he held his hand out. Keep yourself open, Eden, it's time. Summoning the Samadhi winds forth, the grave was undug and a wrapped body was carefully carried out by them. With his other hand he summoned forth the fruit's power. Your family needs you, Scarlet, now wake up. Garp and Scarlet was covered in light. Scarlet! A one-legged toy soldier yelled out, a toy gun in his hands as he hopped towards the tree, until death tackled him to the ground. The light faded and the wrappings undid themselves, revealing Scarlet, alive once again. Bogart quickly sheathed his blades and ran up and caught her in his arms as the winds faded. Suddenly time slowed as Eden glowed. Your chance. Garp reached out to the space between him and the bag of fruits and gripped the air tightly. Time resumed and the air in Garp's fingers glowed red. At first it coalesced into the vague shape of the rise fruit, but then it elongated, twisted, warped, and finally roared. Hello, rise, Garp greeted as a demon appeared, his hand tightly gripped around its neck. It had the swirling marks of a devil fruit, its skin red. With a pair of horns on its head with green hair, one eye was a clock while the other was an hourglass. 2 of its bottom teeth protruded from its bottom lip, growling at him. It kicked at him, but it was relatively weak. You still need some training, not enough use it seems, Garp observed. Let's make a deal, devil of the fruit. Rise ceased its struggles and looked Garp straight in the eye. It looked at him for a moment before its eyes widened. Garp let it go and it fell to its knees and bowed, slamming its head to the ground. It let out several growls, hisses, and clicks before it looked back up. Garp held his hand out, and the devil of the fruit held it reverently. It purred as it glowed and its shape changed once more. What the hell? Doflamingo finally found his voice, stepping back slightly. Bogart, get her out of here, Garp ordered as the devil of the fruit transformed into a sword. The guard was an hourglass and the pommel a clock. Along the hilt was the swirls of a devil fruit and the tip of the blade was green, just like the stem of the fruit. Garp bounced it in his hand slightly, getting used to the weight. Bogart ran and began to fly. Wait! But a rough voice yelled out. Bogart looked down and saw a toy soldier. She has a daughter, she's in the Coliseum. Okay. You're coming with me. Bogart leaned down and grabbed the toy soldier and flew away. Bridget was shaking, but while everyone else thought it was out of fear, the truth was far more different, yet simple. She was excited. War. You're alive. Oh, this is gonna be fun. She could faintly hear Death cursing Garp out in Greek. That's a good show, let's see how you follow it up. Garp chuckled as lightning covered him and his disappeared from sight for a moment, before he appeared behind Doflamingo and set him aflame with Samadhi fire. He burned into strings, a fake. Garp then clicked his heels together and the windfire wheels rebuilt and lit up. He rolled away back through the city and towards where the fighting was. Did he just ignore me? Bridget yelled out, struggling to hold back her laughter. Garp flew through the streets towards his crew. He looked towards the Coliseum as a part of it broke apart and Kuma jumped out of it holding onto something. Once at the fight he kicked Gladius, the wheel tearing up his flesh like a chainsaw. Gladius screamed out as he fell back, part of the cut over his face, near his eye. Garp kept moving and jumped up and threw the sword. From where he had been hiding, using his strings to manipulate the terrain of debris and force some of his subordinates to keep fighting, the sword pierced Doflamingo's shoulder. He let out a curse as Garp landed. How did you know? Garp looked back, seeing a toy soldier fighting alongside his crew against the Don Quixote family, whacking them with a toy rifle. Because the skin felt wrong, it was lined because of the string, Garp answered. Kuma ran past the fight, a gladiator dressed in what couldn't even be called armor in his arms, heading for the ship where Bogart just left. Doflamingo ripped the sword out of his shoulder and tossed it aside, the tip no longer green, but Doflamingo didn't realize that. You're really annoying, you know that? Talk all you want about family or whatever while you still can, because the first thing I'll do is rip out your voice. Bridget appeared in a blast of sound and looked around, zeroing in on Garp and Doflamingo. Wait, Doflamingo's melody, the beat from the rise fruit side effect has been added on. Garp halved his remaining life. Bridget held a hand over her mouth to hide her smirk as she stood up and her hands began to glow, instruments beginning to play as she coalesced the power in between her hands. Her eyes glowed brightly as she unleashed it, launching the granting wish far away first, then the crew right onto the deck alongside the toy soldier in a flash of sound. She bent over and faked dry heaving. Fuck that ability. She acted, falling to her knees as she kept faking the dry heaving. Garp looked at the distant Dressrosa and held his hand out, and after a few moments the guando flew into his hand, Set sail for safe waters. Apollo, go check on our guests. Garp started to pant. Fuck. He cursed and began to fall forward, but Fisher Tiger rushed forward and caught him before he hit the deck. The fishman threw him over his shoulder. I'll get him to the infirmary. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. Support the writer. Don't forget to like, sub, share and donate for more videos.